The San Francisco 49ers are a perfect example of how quickly things can change in the National Football League. You're talking about a team back in 2012, went to the Super Bowl, was a missed fourth down conversion away from winning the Super Bowl. Then the next year, a team that gets back to the NFC Championship game and loses late on a Richard Sherman tip that ultimately is intercepted. And then 3 years later, his team is one of the laughing stocks of the league. That's what happens when you have terrible ownership, looking specifically at you, Jed York, who allows an egomaniacal, over his head, idiotic general manager, Trent Baalke, to do things his way and ultimately submarine and completely sabotage the organization. Let's run Jim Harbaugh the hell out of town, even though we've enjoyed a tremendous amount of success with him because he's tough to deal with, he's hard to work with, he's a bit of a pain. Yeah, who wants to win football games? Then let's hire Jim Tomsula because ultimately we wanted Adam Gase. We offered Adam Gase the job, but told him he had to keep this guy on his staff in order for him to get the job, and he said no. And then Adam Gase, of course, went off and did his own thing and ultimately got a head coaching job another year down the road. And lo and behold, what he did. He took the Dolphins to the playoffs in his first season as a head coach. Then they bring in Chip Kelly, coming off of his disaster in Philadelphia, because that was going to work out tremendously. 1 year, he's gone. So mercifully, somebody got a clue in the York family and decided that Trent Baalke finally needed to go. So you've got a new regime, new leadership, a new era in San Francisco. And of all people, they bring in John Lynch. And this was an unpopular move. This was a widely panned and criticized move. And at the time, when it was first announced, I was 50-50 on it. Because I'm like, a guy like this could be successful. It could also be a Matt Millen. I'm just saying. We really didn't know and needed to allow things to play out. And, you look at somebody like a John Elway for the Broncos. He had never really had a bunch of front office experience. He was given the keys to the Broncos organization, and he built a Super Bowl champion. So it can work. Not saying ultimately it's going to, not saying it won't, because honestly, even at this point, we don't know. But with John Lynch, you feel like there's somebody that maybe has a better head on his shoulders than Trent Baalke. And then bringing in Kyle Shanahan and committing to both of these guys like the organization did with the 6-year deal says to me that this team is in it with these two guys for the long haul, trying to produce some type of stability in the organization, and that is a great place to start. Now, with this 49ers team, they had one of the worst rosters in the league, and no one-off season is going to fix it. I do applaud John Lynch for fighting them temptation to massively overspend in free agency. See, sure, they brought in guys like Brian Hoyer, Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin, Kyle Juszczyk, whatever. They brought in pieces, but that was just the simple fact of that offense was so remedial that it wasn't even like D1 college level good. It wasn't Power 5 conference good. So you have to bring in some guys. You have to bring in some guys that can play a little bit at the NFL level on the offensive side of the ball. You just have to. And no, it's not going to make a huge bit of difference, but you had to get a little more respectable. And the 49ers, I felt like in this offseason, did some things to at least get on the path to slowly rebuilding this thing. I thought they did pretty good work in the NFL draft, trading down with the Bears from 2 to 3, still being able to get Solomon Thomas, and then turning around at the tail end portion of round 1, being able to pop back up and get Reuben Foster. Those are two guys on defense, especially as this team transitions to a 4-3, that you expect will be cornerstones, building blocks of this team going forward. Then getting other guys in the draft like Ahkello Witherspoon from Colorado, the corner. I'd expect him to play quite a bit as a rookie. On offense, you bring in a guy in the 3rd round in C.J. Beathard. I thought that was a big reach at the time, but apparently Kyle Shanahan likes something about him. That's got to mean at least a little bit of something, and he'll probably get a chance to play sometime this year. And then even getting a guy like George Kittle, his teammate from Iowa. Here was a guy that I thought at the tight end position was pretty underrated throughout the draft process, and I expect him to get some opportunities this year. So you bring in some free agents to fill in some of the many holes that you have, And in the draft, you bring in some guys that could potentially contribute right away and a couple of guys that should arguably be defensive cornerstones for this team for years to come. It's been worse for the 49ers. It's just going to take a lot of work. Now, looking at this roster on paper in 2017, where are they strongest at? I think it's still on the defensive side of the ball. In particular, the defensive front. You've invested 3 first-round picks in the defensive side of the ball in recent years. Solomon Thomas, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead. So in theory, they should have one of the best defensive line units in all of the National Football League. It'll be interesting to see how this fits together with Armstead, Buckner, and Thomas. Who plays inside, who plays outside, where do they play, when do they play, how do they play. But in general, again, the defensive line should still be pretty good. And the linebacking core, being anchored by somebody like a Navarro Bowman, should be pretty solid as well. So the 49ers defense doesn't totally stink. They have a front 7 that is at least respectable with some upside, especially if Reuben Foster could come in and play like a lot of people expect Reuben Foster to. Still a lot of concerns pretty much throughout the rest of the team. On defense, the secondary is kind of young. How well are they going to play on offense? You still don't have much in the wide receiving core at all. Nobody that really strikes any fear into you. I mean, you're probably looking at Pierre Garçon being your number 1 guy, and he's always been better as a number 2 possession type of receiver. And then you look at the quarterback situation. You've got Brian Hoyer, you got C.J. Beathard. How many NFL games do you think you could actually win with one of those 2 guys in 2017? That's going to be a question that we're going to find out the answer to very soon. Now, in terms of players to watch for this team, I look at offense and I look at Carlos Hyde. Here's a guy that we believe Kyle Shanahan isn't that big on, but because of the injury to Williams, the rookie out of Utah, Hyde's going to be the starter, and he's probably going to get a lot of carries. And with him heading into a contract year, this might be the perfect marriage of if the guy could stay healthy, which is a massive if, where opportunity and timing creates a big year for this guy and helps bring some type of legitimacy to that 49ers offense that so badly, desperately needs it. And then also on offense, I look at C.J. Beathard. You took this kid in the 3rd round, knowing the 49ers are in a position where they're trying to identify their long-term franchise guy. And is that going to be Kirk Cousins via free agency or trade next offseason? Is that going to be somebody that you draft? Or is it somebody like this kid here? The quicker the 49ers find an excuse to get him on the field and find out what they have. Do they have an NFL starter? Do they have an NFL backup? Do they have an NFL bust? The better off it's going to be. Defensively, I look at Jimmy Ward. Here's a guy that was taken a few years ago from NIU. He's been injured a lot. Hasn't played all that well to me when he has been on the field. Now is an opportunity. Again, it's kind of a shit or get off the pot with this dude as well. He needs to show you something this year. Far too many years with far too few production. Looking at the schedule, I don't know how much the schedule analysis matters because I think everybody agrees this is not going to be a good team. They might be improved and play better, be more competitive, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will reflect directly in the win-loss total. But I look at an early portion of the schedule, weeks 2 through 4. You got 3 straight divisional games. At Seattle, hosting the Rams, and then at Arizona. Now, I don't expect the 49ers to beat either the Seahawks or the Cardinals on the road. But again, when you talk about divisional games, and especially early on in the season, you just never know. But the 49ers have to beat the Rams. If I remember correctly, they had 2 wins last year, and they were both against the Rams. So they definitely need to handle business in week 3. And then I look at the last 2 weeks of the season. If you're looking for games that they could potentially win, you've got Jacksonville at home, and then the Rams in Los Angeles. So there's a way you could figure out for the 49ers to potentially snipe off a few victories here and there and build a little bit of momentum heading into 2018. Because that's what it's all about, is 2018 and beyond. The fact is without a for sure young franchise quarterback in the mix, this team has a lot of holes in a lot of places, and with the damage done by Jed York and Trent Baalke to this organization, it is going to take some time and some work for this team to truly turn it around. I feel like they've got a good guy in place at head coach in Kyle Shanahan. I like some of the moves they've made. I like some of the pieces that they have. But anything more than this team bringing up the rear of the division and being like 3-13, I think would be a massive upset for this organization.